Hi, I'm Joel Nation, CTO of Imminently. In this video, I'm going to take you through our decision support co-pilot tool, Decisively, specifically from a FinTech angle. In this demonstration, I'm going to take some fake loan approval material, they say for a bank, and we're going to put it into the tool, ingest it, create our rules, which will produce what we call a rule graph, which is a visualization of how all our rules link together. And then we're going to debug that rule graph by looking at how it runs an auto-generated interview process for us. First, what you're seeing is our web-based interface where rule authors come in and create our projects. We could have any complex structure on the side here with folders and lots of different documents, but here we've just got a simple document. We're going to paste in our source material. In this case, is some general eligibility requirements. And now what we need to do is ingest that source material and create the rules. We need to tell the system what is important in that legislation. What we're going to do is we're simply going to create a section, call it section 4.1. And now I could write out these rules myself manually, but I'm actually use our trained AI to do this for us. This trained AI, when I click the generate button, is trained on our legislational understanding. It's going to take that source material and generate and produce the rules, as you can see here. You can see on the side, we've got age requirements had to be at least 21 years old and less than 65. And you've got 21 and 65 here. They have to have an income of minimum $30,000. It's got that there. These are effectively the questions that are going to be asked in our interview process. The key thing to note is that these are all written in English. This is the code that we're going to execute. There is no Java or .NET that we have to write. We just use English. Let's insert that into our document. We're really happy with that. And we'll save that first. All right, so that's saved. Let's go look at what it's produced, which is our rule graph. This is the visual representation of our source material. Now you notice that this is a very simple rule graph, but you can imagine this having thousands of nodes and lots of interconnectedness. What's trying to tell us that all these blue inputs are what's going to drive the goal of, do they meet the general eligibility requirements for this loan? And you'll see on the side here, we've got the applicant's age, the minimum income, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now what we can do is let's do a debugging session. We're going to see the rule graph in action. That rule graph is the thing that actually is going to execute at runtime. We're going to run an interview process, and we're going to use what's called the auto-gen system. The auto-gen system, using relevancy, works out the most relevant question to ask you now, i.e. what is the shortest number of questions I can ask you to get to an answer. Here it's asking us the applicant's age because it's the first question in the system. And I'm going to say that I'm 30. Then the system's going to ask the next relevant question, which case is the minimum income. Now we could have a much more complicated interview process. We could collect multiple pieces of information at once, have lots and lots of different screens, and go through really complicated interviews. But this is to show you how it basically works. Let's say yes to this one, but let's say that they haven't provided us pay stubs. Say false to that. And now you see that the interview is complete already. It hasn't bothered to ask these questions because they're not relevant. We already have an answer. The person is not eligible for a loan. If we produce this in the normal system, the normal interview system, we would end up with what's called a decision report being generated. This decision report is a detailed audit trail of every single piece of information we collected from applicant and the decisions that we made along the line. What we actually do is drill in and say, well, why did they not meet the general eligibility requirements? And you get all the pieces of information that could potentially be provided and their values. In this case, we said false to the fact that they had no pay stubs, which means that we ultimately fail the general eligibility requirements because that was one of the requirements for this particular loan. So through this, we were able to see that we were able to create using very, very basic documents, put the material in the tool, have it automatically understand and generate what we call a rule graph, and then produce these really complex systems. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a small modification to our thing to show you one extra feature around the Decisively product. 1 second. Okay, in this one, I've just made a very subtle modification. One of the requirements was that the applicant's credit score was verified through a recognized credit reporting agency. If I left that like it was here, then we would have just asked the applicant that piece of information. And of course, they're probably going to say yes. So what I've done is I've created what's called a rule sheet, and I put a list of all of the agencies that we trust to verify credit score. So if an applicant can tell us they get a ABC verifier was their credit score provider, then yes, they are verified by us and are accepted. You'll see that changes the interview ever so slightly. So if we go back to it, it's still going to ask us the applicant's age, which we'll say yes to. Let's say the income is 30,000. They've got pay stubs, and our credit score is 700. And the credit reporting agency, now I could type anything here, but let's say that I said, no, my credit reporting agency was ABC Verifiers. Now they wouldn't know that's necessarily one of our verified ones. Press next, and you can see that passed the value. This is just another way we can extend and keep building upon the rule base. The important part of this was not only were we able to use a rule sheet, so another way of getting us information, but we can continue to build upon our rule graph over time. So as we understand and verify more and more information, So for instance here, has the applicant defaulted any loans in the past 5 years? We instead might ask questions about their loan defaults or more detail, and we can build up our rule graph over time. Thank you for listening and look forward to more Decisively videos.